Howdy, Spyro here. This video is going to cover a lot, and I'm going to try my best to timestamp it so that you can forward through the video to find out what you need to exactly know. This video is going to cover a pretty good list of things that's commonly made a mistake on why your computer won't boot, won't show anything on display, why it's well, let's just say several things. So let's just jump right in. The first thing is the power supply connector. A lot of people will make the mistake of not putting the power connector on all the way. And you should be able to take on your connector, which I'm going to take the video out, the camera out. I'm going to go up here and grab me a flashlight. I should have had it already. Grab me a flashlight so people can see. Yeah. All right. Now, as you can see, this one here. Let's see. Now. Crap. Great. Well, let's see. Let's see. Let's see where. Nope, that ain't gonna work. Don't have a motherboard or a spare motherboard to show, but I'll take the RAM out because I gotta show one of the demonstrations on RAM. Anyway, so sorry about that. But anyway, the power supply cable, as you can see, there's no gap. That is not all the way. That is correct. As you can see, it's all the way. There is a latch on the other side, which I cannot show in this video for reasons due to I cannot get to it. But that latch should be latched. And the whole entire connector should be plugged in. Also, to make things easier, some of these cables and how I plug it in, they split. They have a 20. They have a, check my light out. They have a, this is a 24 pin connector. Count the pins, there's 24 pins there. They actually have a split in them to where you can slide the connector off. This one here don't. But if yours does, slide the 4 pin in first, then the 20 in afterwards. On some of them, but most of them anymore, they're all fixed in one connector. But that's one common mistake people makes. Now let's see if I can get that back in there. Okay. Next is RAM is not installed correctly. Now, if you look at the RAM, the slot looks like it's in the middle. It's not in the middle. That RAM slot is actually off to one side. This is DDR3, DDR4 is also in another kind of a different spot. Some might be closer to the center, but you need to look at that. And you also need to look at the slot itself, as it will make a difference. As you can see, there's a little spot right smack dab in the center of the slot, as you can see. And as you can see, it's also towards the one side than the other. Well, for this RAM here, I have 2 latches at the bottom and 2 at the top. It's kind of hard for me to do. I can't really do this any other way. Let's see. I can do it. Flashlight. Let's see. It's kind of hard for me to see if that works in this video. Let's see. Let's see. Nope, that ain't gonna work. There we go. Kind of hold this and do this at the same time. So for this RAM, the slot is actually towards the top. So I gotta hold my RAM to where the notch is closer to the top. I also got to flip these open, these open. Some of them, they only have one. And if you only have one, you got to take the RAM and manually insert it in the one side first, all the way down in the slot and kind of push it in, then lock it down in there. This RAM here, you don't. This slot here, you don't. So what I've done, you got to open both slots open, and as you push on the RAM, they both will close. And as you hear, click, click. You got to push very hard. As you can see, I've left some indents on my fingers. See? So it's kind of hard to push in, but how you'll know is if you also look at the side of the RAM. See? There. The notch closed in on the RAM, and the other side also closed in onto the RAM. So that stick is also installed. Now, you want to install your RAM on the correct slots. That does make a difference because some motherboards will not post, and what post means is anything displays on screen. So if somebody asks you about posting, that means that is anything showing up on screen. And you want to refer to your motherboard's manual to find out what slot your RAM goes in. Because for Intel, which this is an Intel motherboard, it's the stick closest to the CPU cooler if you got one stick. If you got 2 sticks, then it's the one closest to the motherboard, then the one next to it if you got 2 slots. If you got 4 slots, then it's 2 sticks, it's one closest to the motherboard. You skip a slot and you go to the 3rd slot because those 2, 1 and 3, is known as the separate channels. That means 2 channels. Then 2 and 4 is also another set. So it's 2 channels, 1 and 3, and 1 and 2 is on the same channel. 3 and 4 is also on another channel. So 1 and 2, if you put a stick in 1 and 2, it's going to run a single channel, meaning the RAM is only going to run at half of the total speed of both sticks combined. So you want to refer to your manual on what stick needs to go in. If you have 1 stick, you want to run memory at single channel, 2 sticks, dual channel, etc., etc. Okay, that part there is done. GPU and the wrong port. A lot of people, they think, okay, got GPU, plug it in, it's working. No. Some motherboards have multiple ports in the inside slots, your PCIe slots. My motherboard here has 1. Some motherboards has 2, some motherboards has 3, some motherboards has 4. You want to put the graphics card in the topmost port because your motherboard always prioritizes the topmost port, which is the one closest to your CPU, first. It's basically, it gets first first dibs on all the total lanes, which this motherboard here has 16 lanes. So, plus the other lanes that is left for Southbridge and yada yada yada. And there's some trickery involved, but anyway, the top slot GPU, stick it in there, 16 lanes. If you insert the GPU in the second slot, let's say your motherboard has a second slot, what that would mean is 16 lanes is in the top slot, but you insert in the second slot, the motherboard is designed, hey, we got to split that bandwidth up, 8 lanes in the top, 8 lanes in the bottom. So your GPU is only going to have 8 lanes. That means it's only going to run at half the bandwidth dedicated to it. And also, slot makes a difference because some motherboards will not post or work when the GPU is in the wrong slot on the motherboard. So you want to make sure your GPU is in the topmost slot. No ifs, ands, or buts. Okay, the GPU video cable. If you do not have a GPU, then, because this is a very common mistake, very common. Trying to get this where that's shiny. Okay, this motherboard here, I have all these this is your I/O. I have a PS2 keyboard, PS2 mouse, HDMI, DVI, VGA, your USB ports, your Ethernet, and your sound. Well, and then you have your GPU down below. Well, let's say my monitor is VGA, but my GPU does not have VGA. Well, some people will think, oh, I don't have a VGA port, but my monitor does, so I have to use this. Well, guess what? You're out of luck. You cannot use your monitor with your GPU. When you hook your monitor up, it's either A, not going to display, or B, it's going to use the integrated graphics on your motherboard. So, if you have a GPU, you always want to use the ports on your GPU. For this GPU here, you have HDMI and DVI. So I would have to make sure my monitor, or whatever I'm plugging it into, has a DVI or HDMI. Has to be the ports there. Not there. Okay? Moving on. Okay? Video cable, mixed RAM speeds. Okay. It is perfectly fine to mix RAM speeds. Perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing is your motherboard will automatically clock the RAM speed to what both of the sticks support. For, let's say you have a 3200 stick and a 2133. All right. Both sticks supports 2133. They are going to run at 2133, not 3200, because the one stick can only go up to 2133. So, yeah. Now, if you have two sticks and they have 3200 megahertz, and if they're showing up in your computer, either in Windows or in BIOS or anything like that, as the slower speed, such as 2666, then you would need to get into your BIOS. You'd have to look it up on your motherboard's manufacturer's website and see if you can enable DOCP or XMP. DOCP is AMD, XMP is Intel. You'd have to actually go in and see if your motherboard supports that and how to enable that. Sometimes XMP and DOCP will cause issues because you're technically overclocking the RAM. So it will cause instability. It can cause instability. If your computer's showing a lot of blue screens, freezing, if it's laggy, in other words, then you want to disable XMP or DOCP and see if it actually helps, because your RAM just might not like running at that speed, or your motherboard does not like running that RAM at that speed. All right. Power supply size. You basically would want to figure out what your components, the wattage is total, your CPU, motherboard, RAM, hard drives, how many fans, LEDs, graphics card. You do not want to get too small of a power supply. You do not want to have a GPU, hard drive, SSD, 2 sticks of RAM with an i7 12900K, and you're overclocking it with a 350 watt power supply. You want to get a power supply that's more than enough. You also want to make sure you get a very efficient and good power supply from a good manufacturer, such as an EVGA, a Corsair, just to name a few. You also want to get a good plus rated power supply, a good high efficiency power supply. The one that I'm using is an 80 plus gold, which is pretty well standard. You could go with an 80 plus silver, 80 plus platinum. There's several different ratings. Asking the server what would be a good rating if you're not sure, but look for at least an 80 plus gold, and you should be good. For power supplies, you should not run anything if you're running a GPU with a very high end CPU, LEDs. You don't want to run anything less than 750 watts. It's my line where I draw. Modular power supplies are also very nice because you can also take the excess cables, unplug them, and store them away someplace so you don't have to worry about all your case clutter. It creates better airflow. There's also hybrid power supplies. Don't do that because not all your cables will be able to unplug. And also, when you take your cables, and if you do have a hybrid power supply, make sure your cables are plugged into the correct port, because you can easily plug one cable in the wrong port and fry that component. So when you do, make sure you just hook up one cable at a time and run it one at a time. Do not run all your cables, then plug them into your power supply then. Okay? When to stress test your system after you get it built, take and just leave it set for a while. Make sure the system is going to work. Basically, install Windows updates. That's just going to be enough stress on it already. If you're in BIOS, that puts a good amount of stress on the components. If it survives, it's good. Okay? Because when you put thermal paste on your CPU, it's got to cure. So the temperatures is going to be higher than what they are going to be at everyday use until the thermal paste cures and everything levels out. So I would wait till you get a few hours of use on the computer after a period of time, because on a fresh computer build, your temperatures can be high because the thermal paste hasn't cured and hasn't filled in the cracks. And yeah. Okay, so next is, I can't stress this enough, and I've said it several times in this whole daggone video: read the manual. You have no idea how much stuff is in the manual. You have no idea how important it is, because it can tell you about your ports, your front panel headers, which a lot of people makes the mistakes of plugging your front panel cables in incorrectly. Don't just plug them in and guess, because it ain't going to work. Your manual will help you out a lot. It will help you on which RAM is compatible, which CPU is compatible, how to update the BIOS if necessary, how to update the BIOS, etc., etc. If you have, well, that's everything actually. Well, hopefully this video helped you out. If you have any questions, ask in the server. This is Spyro here. Have a good one.